Thank you so much, Coralie and John, for this conversation. I will just leave it to you to start wherever you want us to journey with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Basically, we've both been on a spiritual journey since we were 18 and 19 years old,
Mm.
studying meditation then. It guided our whole life, where we lived, the people we were friends with. It was our life, our spiritual journey. We even moved to independently of each other with our then families to a small town called Fairfield, Iowa, so that we could be in this spiritual community and raise our children there. Our children were raised in a school where they all started meditating when they were 4 years old, and then they continued meditating through high school. None of them went straight through. So there were little gaps here and there where they were either homeschool or public school or whatever. But in any case, that's why we wanted, both of us independently wanted to be there to raise our children in this beautiful spiritual community. And then over the years, things changed. In 2006, we were introduced by a mutual friend to the Oneness Organization, which is now what we call GAM, Golden Age Movement. A girlfriend and myself said, we have got to go to India for this 21-day program. We went the fall of 2007. It was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And I can remember coming home, getting off the plane, walking into the airport and seeing John and our daughter Miranda. I get tears in my eyes just remembering that moment, how much I had changed and how beautiful the world had become as a result of that 21-day process. Oh, we were at that time in our worldly life, we were running an organic grocery store that
Oh,
John had started 5 years before that or something.
Yeah.
We, along with his business partner, Paul, were running this very large organic grocery store and restaurant in Fairfield, Iowa. It's kind of like the hub meeting spot of this community. It turned out when I got back from the course, John said he had really wanted to go, but he knew that because of what we did at the store, we couldn't both be gone at the same time. It was only when I got back that he said he really wanted to go too. So he went the following January. You can go from there.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting about that was that I had reached a point where I was having an existential crisis within an existential crisis. The original, the original existential crisis was that at a very young age, well, at the age of 14, almost 15, my mother died. And because I was very close to her, my world literally dropped out from me. I was competitive and not really connected to my younger brother. My father and I didn't go along very well. So I had no one. And I remember feeling for many, many years this un, unqualified, constant sense of loneliness and angst.
mm.
And I was consumed by the desire to find out why in the world it had happened. And then that morphed into a really kind of, why am I here? What is this life all about?
Mm.
So that took me into comparative religions. And at that point, I had learned to meditate. Because amongst other things, in the time that I was living, I became a very serious drug addict. I had a very, very serious treatable habit. I credit that meditation and so forth because of the dogma and rules and regulations associated with that movement of actually saving my life. So I had a great deal of allegiance to the teaching for many years. And then I began to realize that despite the fact that was still alive and I'd recovered and I had this marvelous person to be with now and a successful business and two wonderful
Mm.
children, At the time, and then 4,
Mm.
um, I realized that the reason I had gone and had gotten involved in that spiritual program had not been fulfilled.
Mm.
Yeah. So I was realizing that, yes, my life was better, but the real quest to try to fill this bottomless pit in my heart just hadn't happened. So as a result, I was having, a really existential crisis of should I continue with this? Because on one hand, I had tremendous respect and loyalty to this program that had literally saved my life, and yet I was at a crossroads. I realized it was no longer working. So the backstory for Coralie is
Mm.
her girlfriend. They were doing the one of the early iterations of the blessing, which was hands-on Deeksha.
Mm.
And at the time, I was a little jaded by life because I was not happy. I mean, I got to a certain point and then it stopped. So I thought it was just a ladies get together. They every time they'd get together, they'd have their program and they'd all start to giggle and laugh. And I just thought it was just a lady thing, right? And it was, you know what I mean? And I thought, well, shoot, I'm not going to do that. I'll be the only guy in there and I'll be uncomfortable. So I kind of blew it off. And then our son got graduated from college in California.
Mm.
And quietly, in the middle of this celebration for his graduation, I went in the backyard with the person who was the giving, had become a blessing giver and was doing that. I asked her quietly to give me that experience. So I went in the backyard and I literally sat down in their garden. And because of where we were sitting, she had to stand behind me. It was the only comfortable place she could be. And she placed her hands on my head and gave me the blessing. And I remember the sensation that she had just taken a pitcher of water and poured it on my head
Wow.
because what I felt was a river of what I now know to be Param Jyoti pouring onto my head, over my face and back and down my back in and into where I was seated. I felt initially that I had was sitting in a pool of water because it was such an intense experience. And then I don't know where I went. I know now that I went into Paramjoti, the light,
Mm.
there and disappeared for some time. And so about 45 minutes to a part of an hour later, I came back into what I thought was normal consciousness and realized that I had to do this. That I had been given, because I felt like a gift, I had been given an experience and I realized that this was the answer to the prayer, that this was the answer to that this new crisis of realizing I'd gone as far as I could go with this other spiritual path. So that's what got me involved in the Golden Age movement. I'll share with you one small story that in the beginning, during my 21-day course, we had what I didn't understand at the time, but was the phenomenal blessing of being able to be with Sri Bhagavan in a group of about 100 people from North America. It was intimate. I characterized that meeting as a fireside chat with God. He was casual. He was leaning on his chair. He was laughing and chatting and asking questions and so forth. In the middle of this thing, he stopped and he paused and he looked over to his left, which was in India, because of the tradition, it was that was the ladies half of the
Mm.
hall. They were
Mm.
seated on that side. He said, "Well, is there a Kathy Smith here?" There was no answer. He said, "No, no," and he pointed. He said, "Is there a Kathy Smith here?" And this woman who I'd never met stood up behind me. She said, "I'm Kathy Smith." And he said, "Well, I just want to let you know I've heard all of your prayers and I'll answer every single one of them." And then it was just quiet. And he paused and said, "You must all know. I know everything about you. I know the names of your children. I know where you live. I know what you do for work. I know what your houses look like. I know your past, your family. I know everything about you. You're here because I want you here. And at that moment, I realized that he had reached out to me to bring me what I now know is home.